Okie dokie, everybody. Here we go. We are live. Happy Friday. Happy Venus Day. Welcome to the live stream. We are here today to do another round of the Astro-Babble, where we take 8 charts that have been donated by you, the lovely followers of the live stream, and we are going to basically talk shop. We're going to dissect these 8 charts over the next hour, give you feedback and tidbits and some astro knowledge, and share with you a little bit about what I do one-on-one with clients. These are mini readings, about 7 to 10 minutes each, and I'd love to go more in depth with any of you one-on-one, so feel free to check out my website, ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. The YouTube channel, just search for ScorpioRisingAstrology.com on YouTube. We'll pop open a fizzy water, get to it, because we've got work to do, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody in between. So let's take a peek. So our first chart is going to be, oh, and before I begin, I'm so sorry. I forgot. Told myself I was going to say this first, but I got so excited. I do need more charts. We are coming to the end of the list. I do have 2 to 3 days worth of charts in the queue, but if you or your friends or anybody who's interested in astrology would like to be a part of the queue, please, I need more charts. So send in your birth dates, places, and exact times via private message. Share the live stream with people that you know, like, and trust, and especially people who would appreciate the content, and that's that. Anyway, sorry. Because I love this. We need to keep doing this. So anyway, Facebook, Instagram, thank you for watching. Let's talk about Amy. Amy, my darling, let's give your chart a peek. Bold of you to put Jupiter in Leo in the first house. That's a big old personality, Amy. Not gonna lie. Oh, Sun is in Sag, co-present with Venus in the 5th. Oh, girl, you'd be a great mom. Okay, so Leo ascendant automatically gives a solar flare to the personality. The sign on the ascendant, for those of you who aren't aware of your 3 major placements for personality, the ascendant is more important, in my opinion, than the sun or the moon. The sun is the active presence of the personality. It's how we choose to give our solar radiance to the world. The moon represents the deeper subconscious needs of how we like to be fulfilled. But the ascendant is really who we are as a person, which is why I always encourage people to read horoscopes for their rising sign, not necessarily for their sun sign. Although in Amy's case, we have a really nice kind of fiery blend in the chart. Lots of good mutability. She has a full moon in the chart in Gemini. But anyway, the ascendant in Leo paired with Jupiter in Leo retrograde in the 1st, there's this big flamboyance to the personality, although it does get her in trouble with some of the retrograde that Jupiter is in. That's a little bit of a sticky situation, because Jupiter in Leo has all this charisma, but if it's going backwards, then some of that charisma can be underhanded. It can be a little bit hard to control, that kind of stuff. The chart is ruled by the sun in Sagittarius in the 5th house. I'm such a fan of this placement, Amy. You put that solar radiance ruling the chart, but also in a fiery sign of Sagittarius. Sagittarius known for its creative endeavors, known for its worldliness, known for its ability to spread excitement in this 5th house of creativity, but also children and parents, which is why, again, the idea of you specifically attaching your identity to that of the parent is very, very important for your sense of self-esteem. If you do not have children of your own, which I bet you do, it is going to be very important for you to work with children in some way, shape, or form to fulfill your solar qualities. You've also put Venus in Sagittarius here in the 5th house, which is a very spunky Venus. Venus can be a little bit more laid back, a little bit lazy, somewhat repressed in some of her negative connotations. But when we look at Venus in Sagittarius, this is a very lively Venus. This is a mutable fire Venus. This is Venus who loves to dye her hair multiple colors and go on shopping sprees and exhibit fashion and really study spiritual culture and wrap herself in various veils of exciting and somewhat eccentric pieces of the world, and I really enjoy that being in the 5th house of creativity. So there's a lot of really cool chemistry in the chart already, Amy, that I'm a fan of. But we do have this full moon in Gemini in your 11th house of friendships that we do need to talk about for a hot minute. So whenever there's a full moon in the chart, and for those of you who have not Like, it's one thing to know your moon sign, right? Because that is how your emotions not only need to be fulfilled, but how they express themselves. But the phase of your moon in your chart is also very important. So for those of you who are born during a new moon, yeah, it means that your emotions will largely be under the surface. It will be very hard for you, as well as other people, to tap into those emotions because they're buried so deep. They are so dark. The light of the moon has been overshadowed by its position near the sun. However, for those of you with a full moon in the chart, your emotions are literally that bright lunar energy in the sky. You wear your heart on your sleeve, and there is a lot of heart to wear, especially with Gemini. I appreciate a full moon in Gemini because it's somebody who can really understands the emotional extremes really well. Somebody who can go from 100% living the best life and enjoying every second of every day to the lowest of lows and the deepest of depths emotionally. That range that Gemini carries, especially with a full moon in the chart, is unparalleled, but it does require a little bit more management and understanding because you already have so much spice in your chart, Amy, with this Leo ascendant, with Jupiter, this Sun, Venus in Sag in the fifth, and then the full moon, plus Mars is co-present in Gemini, although it is retrograde in the 11th house. Like, your charisma is very, very strong. Unfortunately, we do need to make sure that you rein that in just a little bit because we're getting a little bit too hot and heavy, just a little bit too hot and heavy. And where we find remediation for this hot and heaviness in the chart is going to be through the sixth house of work, because you have a nice stellium here. You have Mercury in Capricorn, Uranus in Capricorn, Neptune in Capricorn, Saturn in Capricorn, and the North Node in Capricorn, all in the sixth house of work, health, and pets. It's very interesting from that perspective when we look at your chart being so work focused. Not necessarily from an ease perspective, but you understand the idea of working in one place for an extended period of time. It's not something that you do when it comes to job hopping. Like, having Saturn and Capricorn in the sixth roots you to a profession that you will stay in for a very, very long time. Especially because that Saturn is at 22 degrees, making an exact trine to your MC at 22 degrees in the 10th house. Like, you understand this idea of working hard over time yields the best results. You're not about playing the game of the work environment. It's about just an honest day's work, and understanding how to climb the ladder over time. There is you are a little bit of a fun sucker in the work department, and I think that that's both necessary but something that needs to be understood. Like, Mercury in Capricorn is an interesting placement to put in the sixth, because Mercury, as a flighty planet, as a planet that represents the mind and the intellectual faculties, you've closed that off in Capricorn and said, nope, we're only going to focus on this one thing because this one thing is the only thing that's important at this time. Same thing with Uranus and Neptune. Both of those tend to be a little bit more unpredictable. Uranus specifically tends to be very chaotic. Neptune tends to be a little bit more whimsical. You've slapped Capricorn over both of those and decided, you know what? Any chance of mutability, any chance of fun, any chance of us doing things that's spontaneous or out of the normal, yeah, we're not going to do that. Because everything is about learning how to ground yourself through the daily tasks. And you're actually really good at it. It wouldn't surprise me, because you have Aquarius on the 7th house being ruled by the Saturn in the 6th, that you work in the relationship industry, or your work is very relationship driven. You could work in weddings, you could work in matchmaking, you could work anything where you're bringing two people together, and that relationship is the crux of how you choose to serve. That relationship is extremely important, but because you have all this Capricorn energy, I think one of your major work goals and the flavor of your work is actually to push people out of their comfort zone, which not a lot of people understand, because you have this bright and bubbly and very Sag, Leo, Gemini combination where the air just fuels the fire and you get all of this heat and all of this excitement in your personal life. But then when it comes to work, you totally flip the script on everybody. You gloss over and get this hard exterior shell, and you just hit people with everything that you got, and they totally don't expect it. So we do need to work on that just a little bit, maybe soften the blow. And that doesn't mean be less productive. That just means understanding that you're a tour de force when it comes to your work environment that maybe needs a little bit more tact. as opposed to you just barging in like a battering ram and making sure that you intentionally almost antagonize the workspace, because in some ways that helpful antagonizing does breed progress, and a lot of people aren't as focused as they need to be, that's for sure. But the way that you go about it is jarring for people because it's such a flip of personality. So we need to maybe ease people into that Capricorn energy, as opposed to you taking all of this fun, bubbly, I'm an amazing person who just does really fun and awesome things, and then going completely 180 degrees into this cold Capricorn and just saying, oh, by the way, if you don't do this, you're dead. That's a little bit too harsh, even for me. So yeah, that's pretty much about it. You've made your chart very concise, like all fun on this side, all work on that side, and that's kind of your mission this time around, is balancing the two. Cool. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Albert, Carol Ann, Marlone, Stephanie, Michelle, Heal Stronger, Romantics, Santing Method, blah, blah, blah. Virginia Crow, Star, I can't pronounce any of these. I'm so sorry. The Instagram print is so small. But that's our first chart of the morning, and that actually went a little bit too long. I apologize. Let's go to Debbie. So Debbie, we have Debbie born at 12:04 p.m. in Des Moines. Good morning, Debbie. How you doing? We've got some interesting Virgo placements right on the ascendant. With Mercury in Capricorn, or Mercury in Cancer rather, retrograde up in the 11th, co-present with the Sun. I'm not sure how I feel about that, Debbie. Let's take a peek. Oh, I can see that. The Taurus moon kind of brings it all together, the glue of it all. Okay, I see it. So here's the thing, Debbie. So you've got this Virgo ascendant, which, although you have the heart of a Cancer, and you're very much a lovey-dovey person, the Virgo ascendant is really what gives you this very intense need to make things orderly, this very intense need to get down to the finer details of specific projects. And unfortunately, a lot of this is not channeled very well during the first part of your life. Virgo tends to be not super friendly in your chart, because it is ruled by this Mercury Cancer retrograde, and a lot of the areas that you're going to find this difficulty in would be the friendship department, and connecting with large groups and feeling like you are the black sheep always, that you're too hard on people but simultaneously too nice, and striking that balance is going to be very difficult for you, or was very difficult for you in the first half of the life. And part of that is because you've put Pluto in Virgo and Uranus in Virgo, just 2 degrees separate from your ascendant, in Virgo in the first house of self. Pluto is that level 50 planet that matures halfway through the life. It's not a trait that we are able to access until about 50 years old. Uranus, as well as that energy of unpredictability, it tends to make us frazzled in the earlier years. And this is something to understand about astrology in general. Every planet in the chart has a lower expression and a higher expression, has a kind of hurtful expression and a helpful expression. And there are certain choices that we make that allow us to either embody the fullest expression of that planet, or suppress that planet in a way, or act hurtfully with the tools that we're given. Like, scissors can help you make amazing craft projects, but they can also cut you. Yeah. So sometimes we intentionally or unintentionally choose, based on our awareness of what we're working with, to kind of cut ourselves in order to kind of learn the lessons of how to use these tools. Like, if you've ever picked up a hammer, how many times have you unintentionally whacked yourself? And I think that this Pluto and Uranus combo in Virgo in the first is a little bit more of the wacky, just damaging yourself personality wise, because you try so hard to be this mom friend, and unfortunately it's not received very well. This Mercury in Cancer is retrograde in the 11th, meaning that 9 times out of 10, your intentions are pure, but they're not necessarily received. And unfortunately, the boundaries that you try to set are either too high or too low with the people that you surround yourself with circle-wise. So we need to be a little bit more aware of what the intention is with any sort of friendships or social groups. It's very much a habit for you to go into a group expecting nothing and giving everything, but then also walking into a social group, Debbie, and you go to give, yeah, just to be a selfless individual with all this Cancer in your chart. But then also from a Virgo perspective, you're like, but it comes at a cost. And I don't like the way that you're doing things. Let me do things a better way. And that's not unconditional love, right? So in a group dynamic, when it comes to helping, we just need to refine that a little bit more and understand, one, what the expectations are with these groups and people that you let into your social circle. Two, define your own expectations of what you would like to get, and understand how you can best use your skills and they can use their school skills to achieve this common goal that you're working for in your chart. Yes. So that is what the first part of Debbie's chart. But we do have this lovely Taurus moon. The moon is exalted in Taurus. She is very, very happy in Taurus. Taurus is also co-present with the North Node in the 9th house in Taurus. And I'm a big fan of this placement for a couple reasons. The first reason is that a Taurus moon ruling the chart really helps to balance the Virgo and the Cancer. It takes the best parts of Cancer and the best parts of Virgo and combines them with the watery planet of the moon and the earthy sign of Taurus, and really gives Debbie this feeling of needing to be surrounded by 9th house topics in terms of comfort, like culture, like higher learning, foreigners, travel, spirituality, things that she can really sink her teeth into to bridge the gap between these high expectations of Virgo and this bleeding heart of Cancer. Taurus is kind of like the best of both worlds that kind of rings that up and blends the two very nicely together. So that's one thing. But I am seeing this interesting placement in the chart. We do have both benefics. We do have Jupiter and Venus in Leo in the 12th house of hidden enemies. And I'm wondering why she put those there. The ruler of the 12th being in the 11th does indicate, again, that friends tend to take advantage. But also that social groups tend to revolve around the healing process. And I think that this is something that Debbie needs to understand, is like one of the reasons why you enjoy 9th house stuff so much in terms of travel, culture, self-development, is because you recognize that true connection can't really happen unless you and the person that you're with are kind of on the same journey together. You're working through the same karmic baggage, and with you having Jupiter and Venus both in the 12th house of karmic healing, I think that that's going to be a really nice way for you to understand that the people that you surround yourself with need to be engaged in some sort of self-development or self-healing. Otherwise, the relationship is going to be superficial based on just what can you give me or what can I give you, and that's not necessarily how true connection works. We need to be a little bit more holistic, and I think wrapping into the healing world and investigating the 12th house of things like jails, hospitals, rehabs, retreats, the idea of you working with people and enjoying people specifically who are well-traveled, who are worldly, who are engaged in their own self-development. I think that's how we overcome some of these friendship weaknesses in the chart, because that's really kind of what you're here to master, is these 9th house topics of travel, foreigners, higher learning, and spirituality. And the only way that you get exposed to new things is by surrounding yourself with people, places, and things that embody those characteristics. And we only really find those things through the traumatic experiences of the 12th house. So as long as you salt and pepper and cayenne and curry your way through life with the spice of people who have just been through the ringer, it'll make for a much more well-rounded social experience, but also more karmic development, and you'll get extra points that way. Excellent, Debbie. Thank you so much for lending your chart to me. Good morning, Roberto. I missed you at Cityside, girl. So good morning, Linda. Good morning, Michelle. Good morning, everybody who's jumping on. I appreciate you very, very much. If you would like to be a part of the queue, all I need you to do is private message me your birth dates, place, and time dates, like you were born on 2 days. Birth date, place, and time, and I'll add you to the queue and private message you when your chart is featured. But for now, we need to go to Drew. So Drew was born at 11:14 a.m. in Lebanon. Let's take a peek at Drew's chart. Lovely Pisces ascendant. Lovely Pisces ascendant. However, Jupiter is up in the 8th in Libra. Am I a fan of that? How is this chart playing? Again, we have 11th house topics. Let's see. So this Pisces ascendant makes Drew a very watery individual right off the bat, but we have some hardness to counterbalance that water. And I think this is a great example of why we need to look at the sun, the moon, and the ascendant all in context, but in this case, even the ruler of the chart, this Jupiter in Libra, to balance out the personality. A lot of people identify with their sun sign, but they don't understand that we literally have 7 personal planets and 3 outer planets, plus the nodes, plus the ascendant, in order to consider that make up the entire person. Like I had a friend that I went to lunch with the other day, and they asked me, so can you guess my sun sign? And I said, well, I could. There's a 1 out of 12 chance that I'll be right, so it's not really super impressive. But just the idea that you are more than your sun sign is something that I would highly, highly encourage Drew, because the sun being in Capricorn, the moon being in Aquarius, does give you this very Saturnian vibe to your chart. It does make you a little bit more withholding, a little bit more withdrawn, a little bit more stubborn, a little bit more fierce. Especially because you have these planets. The moon is in the 12th house of karmic healing. The sun is in the 11th house of friendships. Like you've decided that you're a no-nonsense kind of guy. And that's okay. I respect that. However, you also have this really gushy Pisces ascendant. And I say gushy intentionally because Pisces is the most mutable sign of the entire freaking zodiac. It's the mutable water sign that literally follows the path of least resistance. It is so sensitive. It is zero boundaries. It is very intuitive, very emotional, very wishy-washy. And you've counterbalanced that with a lot of stubbornness in your moon and sun sign. And so I think that that's a beautiful kind of combination where you have your emotional state in the 12th kind of locked away because you don't really like to deal with your emotions. But I think that because your emotions are so prominent in Pisces with a Pisces ascendant, that's actually an interesting combination where you've decided, hey, for a large majority of my life experience, I'm going to detach because apathy is how I get stuff done. But we still have this really strong emotional pull. Otherwise, you know, if you had something like Libra on the ascendant, or if you had something like Gemini on the ascendant, I would be a little bit more worried. But Pisces does make sure that you continue to have this moisture in the chart, as opposed to being too dry, too earthy, too barren emotionally. So the ruler of the chart is this Jupiter in Libra up in the 8th. You have an entrepreneurial spirit, like you're very much about philanthropic efforts as well, with your sun in the 11th house of social groups and the lord of your chart in the 8th house of entrepreneurship in Libra, the sign of balance. Jupiter in Libra is that king that's worried about justice, and having that in the 8th house, you know, you're absolutely obsessed with the bottom line and making sure that everything is equal, everything is fair, especially in the 8th house of death. You know, it becomes a little bit difficult for you specifically to rationalize why people, why places have to end in order for new things to begin. But you also understand that, you know, everything checks out at the end of the day. You might not always be able to rationalize how it checks out, but, you know, there is a balanced system in the universe at play. And I think the 8th house is an excellent place for you to investigate that. So that's that. Oh, that's interesting. You've put a trine between your Pisces ascendant and Pluto and Scorpio in the 9th. Dude, you've got that intuitive flair. And let me tell you this, Drew. Let me go ahead and lay it on you, because we have some watery things to talk about in your chart, as well as this Mars in Cancer retrograde in the 5th. Despite how much you would like to repress your intuitive side, despite how much you would like to argue against the fact that you are actually very, and I'm going to say this with love because I have Scorpio on the ascendant with Pluto on the ascendant, you are creepy. And I don't mean that in like a weird, gross way of like, you're a creepy dude. I mean that the underworld calls you. And there's this very deep sense of spirituality. There's this very deep sense of intuition. There's a lot of these watery concepts that are underneath the surface of your chart that I think the more you ignore, the more they're going to manifest as things like nightmares, potential poltergeist activity, the idea of the more you ignore this kind of watery side of you, this Pisces, Scorpio, Pluto dynamic that you have going on, I think this is really the key to unlocking a lot of your personal power. Because the more you try to detach, the more you try to apathize your life via all of these Aquarius and Capricorn placements in your 11th and 12th, I think to some degree it can be helpful because there is a logic that a lot of people need in order to ground their spirituality, but your spirituality is much stronger than most, but it is buried rather deep. So I just want to make sure that you don't get into the habit of repressing these watery tendencies because they are very strong, they are very powerful if used correctly, but just because you shut them out doesn't make them go away. Yeah. Instead, we have the North Node in Sagittarius co-present with Mercury in Sag. I like this placement. Being ruled by the Jupiter in Libra. Like, it would be very smart of you to go into business for yourself. I really like that. Oh, that is interesting. We've got multiple aspects popping up in the chart. I could talk about this chart for a lot longer. Unfortunately, I'm going to need to end it with this last note. But I really would encourage you to kind of go out on your own, get some of that entrepreneurial fire going. I think it really fuels your chart. You understanding by placing the North Node in the 10th that you are kind of destined for great things. We just need to unlock those great things steadily over time and work with some of these underbelly concepts that for some reason you feel the need to suppress. And I think that your end game was, if I suppress them, then they'll have a chance to cook, they'll have a chance to ferment, so that when I actually need them, they'll be ready. However, I just want to make sure that those suppressed feelings don't turn toxic on you. Yeah, we need to check on them. We need to give them a little bit of a stir and make sure that they're not like coagulating and clotting and doing gross stuff. Awesome, Drew. Thank you so much. I appreciate you donating your chart. Yes, anybody who has major Scorpio placements, creepy is just something that we have to deal with. We just make people terribly uncomfortable because we can see right through them. I get it. Okay, let's talk about Jonathan. Jonathan is chart number 4. Jonathan was born 6:25 p.m. in St. Paul. Ah, Jonathan, my darling. We have Scorpio ascendant with Pluto in the first house. Although Pluto is retrograde, we have a little bit of an issue with that. That Pluto is making a lovely trine to Mercury in Cancer and Mars in Cancer up in the 9th. Okay. I'm seeing some things that I'm okay with and simultaneously not okay with. So we have a lot of very combustible placements in the chart. We have some very intense squares, some very true oppositions and trines. Things that are a little bit difficult to handle. For instance, the Sun in Gemini is opposing Saturn in Sagittarius retrograde on the 8th and the 2nd axis, which gives you the simultaneous want to branch out on your own, but not the financial wherewithal in order to do it. Jupiter in Aries can be very, very headstrong, very, very fierce in a work environment. But we know from personal experience, and I'm talking we like me and Jonathan, like we know that the more you flaunt your ego at work, the more you're prone to get fired because not everybody wants that big personality that you're packing, especially when you pair it. Aries and Scorpio don't go well together in a social dynamic because you've got this really strong Scorpio side, but then you also have this Aries in the 6th house that you're trying to work with, mal-expressed via the Cancer Mars up in the 9th. I think that people are overly intimidated by you in the work environment. Jupiter in the 6th, I often find people who are overqualified for the work, but it's their personality that really blocks them from getting into the jobs that they want. Because Jupiter makes things big and Aries makes things aggressive and bombastic and very fiery but driven. You take the leadership role any chance that you get, but that leadership role can often lead to the resentment of others, especially because you have this more sinister Scorpio side that's able able to exploit other people's weaknesses, people pick up on that and they're like, hey, you cheated. And you're like, no, I didn't cheat. I get you and I know the game. And so I used it to my advantage. And they're like, yeah, that's cheating. And you're like, no, that's learning the rule book. It's different. So we just need to be very aware that that Jupiter in Aries needs to be vented appropriately in a profession that's going to respect the bigness of your leadership skills, and how that Scorpio energy can kind of aid you in that, as opposed to you playing yourself down and then repressing a lot of these very, like I said, kind of combustible features of the chart. We do have Venus and Taurus in the 7th, which is absolutely lovely. I have the exact same placement. One of the things that this Venus and Taurus really speaks to is just the idea of love for love's sake. I find that to be a very pure placement. Unfortunately, it's a placement that tends to attract a spouse that's a little bit on the lazy side, a little bit on the stagnant side. Somebody is a little bit more stubborn. And with Scorpio ascendant and Mars in Cancer in the 9th, you might be a little bit frustrated because your partner doesn't always want to grow with you. And that's just something that you're going to need to kind of play with and hash out, because you as a person need to grow separate out of your relationship, while still growing into the relationship itself. And that's a tricky balance to play with. But the ruler of the chart being in the 9th and then Sun and Gemini in the 8th, they're definite intuitive skills. I mean, anybody with Scorpio ascendant has a healthy dose of intuition, but putting the Sun in the house of death and then putting the ruler of the chart in the 9th house of spirituality, I think that's a big flag for intuitive abilities. I mean, you'd be a great manager with this moon in Virgo. I think that's excellent. But we also need to understand, like, you're here to learn how to be a leader. And unfortunately, being a leader sometimes means sacrificing some of your own personal power in order to lead the group or bolster other people instead of you just doing it for them. This Mars in Cancer up in the 9th ruling the chart definitely has this mama bear energy where you really try to overbearingly smother other people because you know how to do it better than they do. And I get it, you do. There's no question. But at the same time, does that actually make you a good leader? In fact, it doesn't, because you actually need to empower other people to do what they're good at, as opposed to you just doing it for them. So I think that's where a little bit of the crux comes in. You have a very widespread chart, so there are a lot of really interesting dynamics that we could pick on, but I think those are the fundamental things as I kind of like bounce around to 12 different aspects of life. But we can always talk about that a little bit more in depth, one-on-one via a consult. Okay. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. So we're halfway through the live stream. If you would like to submit your information to the live stream, just private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I will add you to the queue. I do need more people for the queue. Please share this with your friends, family, anybody who's interested in astrology. I need more names on the list to keep this going. I have 2 or 3 days left. I'd like to get more. So yeah, that's that. And website is scorpiorisingastrology.com. Online classes, consults, the whole shebang. Okay, let's talk about Maria, my dear, born at 4:18 a.m. in Fitchburg. Aquarius ascendant, south node in the 1st house, north node in Leo in the 7th. Scorpio moon up top with the MC conjoin Uranus at 25 degrees in Scorpio retrograde. Interesting placement. 3 more retrogrades in the chart. Saturn in Virgo, Jupiter in Virgo, Mars in Virgo, all retrograde in the 8th. Natally opposing a retrograde Mercury in Pisces, 2 degrees away from the sun in Pisces. That's some interesting dynamics, Maria. Interesting dynamics for sure. For sure. Back to this theme of the 8th house ruling entrepreneurship. You putting your Saturn in the 8th, as well as Jupiter and Mars in the 8th, 2 very expansive and active planets. I think that there is this kind of need to strive in the chart, also with your moon in Scorpio ruling the 6th house of work. You're really kind of here to make a name for yourself. and I get that impulse, but you've also put your North Node in Leo in the 7th, with the Sun in Pisces ruling the 2nd. It's an interesting blend in your chart because you're simultaneously trying to strike out on your own and say, look at me, but then also you've put major placements in houses that are community oriented, that are relationship oriented, that are more about you developing an idea of surrendering into potentially a very financially beneficial relationship, where money comes into the equation very, very readily. Because this Sun in Pisces is ruling that 7th house of relationships through the 2nd house. Yeah, this Sun in Pisces in the 2nd house of finance is ruling the 7th house of relationships. But I'm really concerned with why you chose to put so many planets in retrograde, in opposition to each other. You've clearly decided before you came in that this was not going to be an easy journey this time around. You've decided to trick yourself in many ways, and to make sure that you also learn the lessons that you came here to learn, but in a rather aggressive fashion. Like you've very much decided that a certain amount of difficulty, a certain amount of salt in the life is very beneficial for you specifically. Saturn ruling the chart is always going to make the body physically more feeble, especially during the first 16 to 30 years of life. Having absorption issues as well, because Saturn is ruling the chart via Virgo, the small intestine, and is retrograde, as well as Jupiter and Mars in the sign of the small intestines retrograde. That's a little bit difficult, especially as it leads to autoimmune issues with Mercury in Pisces retrograde, as well as the Sun in Pisces retrograde. The recent Pisces retrograde, February, March, was not kind to your chart at all, especially financially. So many aspects of your chart that need to be nourished that I think are prone to distraction because they're so hard to chew on. I think you've really made it a point that there is a really strong pull into the 10th house of success. But how you've chosen to exercise that and how you've chosen to be successful is not necessarily going to be a cakewalk. Like the most beneficial planet of your chart is this 0-degree Venus in Taurus in the 4th house of family. But even then, it's right on the cusp of that 3rd. Like you haven't really decided to exalt any of your planets. Instead, you've kind of wrapped them all into packages of complexity and depth. And unfortunately, as you work through your own chart, I think it's going to be very, very important for you as a person to take things very slow, very deliberate. You've chosen some high walls to climb. And as long as you respect that, as long as you understand that you're playing the long game here, and you're not really supposed to be approaching any of these situations with ego, instead you're really supposed to be surrendering the ego and allowing other pieces of yourself to kind of take over, like these relationships that are here to help you, especially from a financial perspective. I think that's really where the chart is headed. Unfortunately, there's no real clear direction over time. You have so many choices of what you could do. I think it's more about investigating that 8th house of entrepreneurship, death, taxes, estates, but simultaneously understanding financial wellness doesn't have to be something that you attach your ego to. It doesn't need to be something that you need to do all by yourself. You can rely on other people for help. You can bow and surrender to life circumstance. That doesn't mean that you're weak. In fact, it actually means that you're stronger than most. And yeah, when in doubt, I think hanging out with friends would probably be one of the best remediations of your chart, because we've got this kick-ass Neptune and Sag in the 11th. Like, you know how to have a good time, girl. And I think that because you've put so many heavy placements in very personal places in the chart, I think that you reminding yourself that it's actually therapeutically important for you to go out and have a night with people who you know, like, and trust, and just lose your inhibitions. I think that that's a very important part of the chart that we can't neglect, because you've stacked the odds in your favor over the long term, but not in your favor over the short term. And we need to mix a little bit more fun into the dynamic instead of being so serious and so convicted, like this moon in Scorpio in the 10th kind of wants you to be. Life isn't just about progress. Life is also about fun and enjoyment. And this is something that your family tried to teach you. And unfortunately, it wasn't a lesson that you were really open to. It was something that you kind of had to learn over time was, yeah, it's okay to kick back. It's okay to relax. It's not something that we need to constantly be striving for all the time, for sure. And we could unpack this chart further one-on-one, but there are some placements that I think we need to be a little bit more meditative on, embody, work a little bit more ritualistically with, to unpack, because of all these retrogrades and oppositions in the chart that are a little bit trickier to handle. It's a more nuanced chart, not necessarily appropriate for a 7-minute cold read. Okie dokie. Moving on to chart number six. We have Mila, my dear. How are you? So we have a 4:29 p.m. birth time in Los Angeles. Let's take a peek. So we have Scorpio ascendant with Moon in Scorpio in the first house. 2 major personality markers in Scorpio. Gives a double dose of Scorpio in the chart, as well as she has a triple water sign with this Sun in Cancer up in the 9th. Also makes her very spiritual, very intuitive, very cultured. Some of you laughed at my comment yesterday. Cultured like Greek yogurt, especially very appropriate because Cancer is known to rule the breasts and lactation in females when they are pregnant, and that's very appropriate in this chart. So culture like yogurt is a good way to describe a lot of these placements. But the ruler of your chart is this Mars in Aquarius down in the 4th. You're very family oriented, and in fact you've decided that making a family this time around is your personal goal with this North Node in the 4th house of family. Saturn is ruling it, so we have an interesting blend of the 8th house of entrepreneurship, death, taxes, estates, paired with the 4th house of family. Wouldn't surprise me if death is a major theme in the family. But also we have this Venus and Gemini in the 8th. There's going to be, like, there's always this idea of inheritance, of money coming from other sources, especially from a family perspective. And I think that's going to help rather nicely financially. We do have Neptune in Sag retrograde, as well as Jupiter in Scorpio retrograde, very close to each other in the 1st and 2nd houses. That Jupiter ruling the 2nd house of finance, and then Neptune being in the 2nd house of finance. I don't think finances are particularly strong in the chart. I think that this is something that unfortunately will need somebody else to take over the finances. But because that 4th house, 8th house link is very connected, I think that the inheritance from parents, or parents coming to the rescue financially is something that's a little bit easier for the chart to work with, as opposed to you making money of your own accord. I do think that you having you utilizing your personality to really you utilizing your personality because of that first house to gain resources, like you having just a very deep and a very knowing and a very intuitive personality. That's going to be the key to a lot of your financial resources, because that Jupiter in the 1st is ruling the 2nd. Although it is tricky with that Jupiter being in Scorpio, your first instinct is often to hide, to protect yourself. But what you don't realize is your natural wateriness is what attracts people to you. They might not know how to process it, but they definitely know how to throw money at it. Let's see. What else do we want to talk about? Let's talk about the work environment. So we have the 6th house of work ruled by the 4th house, ruled by Mars and Aquarius in the 4th house of family. So working in the family business, working from home, working in fields such as real estate, because your primary focus here is to build a family. I think that one of the things to be aware of is you can translate that into monetization as well, like your passion for helping other people find homes, your passion to help other people with health and wellness pursuits as well, you having a home-based clinic if you wanted to investigate health stuff, like if you wanted to get into body work, like you working from home, and having a treatment room in your house. But the idea of the sixth house of work, health, pets being very connected to the fourth house of home and family, that's something very present in the chart. What else? This ninth house of travel, foreigners, higher education, spirituality, you've attached your ego to this place, putting the sun here, but also your mind is here with Mercury in Cancer. I think that you're very intellectual, you're very learned, you're very cultured. You understand a lot about foreign processes. You're very good at helping other people translate or decode some complicated mental lessons into things that are a little bit more digestible, a little bit more tangible. And I find that very therapeutic and calming. But again, when compared with the watery signs that you've already placed in your chart, a couple of the things that we're going to need to make sure that you master this go around would be the idea of empathy. The idea of emotional boundaries being very important, more so for you. The idea of you can walk into a room and know more about what people are thinking and feeling than they know themselves. That intuition does come at a cost. It comes at a price. It means that, you as a person need to be a little bit more aware of your internal state because you're constantly swimming through the ocean of other people's feelings. And that's just an awareness that needs to be present throughout your life, because not everybody is going to live in that fishbowl. Not everybody is going to live in that bubble of experience. Yeah, third house of writing, teaching, communication, being ruled by this Saturn in Gemini, up in the eighth house of business. I think you potentially going into business for yourself as an educator would be a smart move. It would also be an excellent investment. Potentially also because the eighth house is that house of death, the death of teachers impacting you greatly, the death of mentors or people who you learned from might have influenced a lot of your earlier growth, as well as just because you've placed this Saturn connected to your chart ruler in the eighth, and you're already so hypersensitive. I think understanding the spiritual realms, the ethers, delving a little bit more into energetic practices and mediumship might be something that you find value in down the road. But those are pretty much the major things, I think. Yeah, I think that's good. Excellent. Thank you, my dear, for submitting your chart to science. Yes, lovely. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. We have 2 more charts to go through. Let's talk about Nicole, my darling. Nicole was born at 12:11 a.m. in LA. Let's take a peek at Nicole's chart. Well, that's interesting. So we've got a Taurus ascendant being ruled by this Venus in Leo in the 4th house of family. So again, we have a family-oriented chart. Somebody who's very specific about what they look for in a family. The family tends to be very Leo-oriented, very attention-seeking, very grabby, touchy, feely. Leo is just a fan of the drama that a family can bring. So although Nicole identifies very heavily with the family dynamic and very close with making sure that family and legacy is a part of the chart, there is a certain amount of Leonian drama because the Lord of the chart is combust, the sun. So outside of that 1 degree conjunction or that 7.5 degree boundary that the sun's light makes in more traditional astrology, that Venus is slightly in detriment. She's a little bit too hot to handle. So Nicole tends to be very, very hyper productive, but that doesn't necessarily work in her favor. I think it's easy for her to become, detached, especially with this moon in Aquarius, this full moon in Aquarius up in the 10th house of career success. It's a big theme for Nicole to just go, do, and simultaneously not realize that she's burned herself out 2 days ago. Yeah. Yeah, that's tricky placements for sure. There's just so much heat in the fourth house of family. It's ridiculous. And that Venus is also ruling Mars and Libra in the sixth. And I think that also compounds the heat in the chart, where Mars would like to be very, very active in the workspace, but he can't necessarily because he's doing too many things at once because of the Libra placement. A distracted Mars is a good way to think of Mars and Libra through the sixth house of work, health, pets. I think because of this, also from a health perspective, having Taurus on the ascendant naturally makes people prone to physical issues revolving around metabolism, the neck, as well as the ligaments, and also having the ruler of the chart combust and having Mars in Libra, another sign that is ruled by Venus, but very connected to the diet because the kidneys are ruled by Libra and the hormones as well. I think we have this really interesting adrenal fatigue type situation that Nicole weaves herself into from a physical perspective, but also from an energetic perspective. Like there's so much heat in the chart that needs to be mediated, that needs to be moderated, that needs to be toned down. Like the combustion, the volume in this bus is astronomical. Like that's where we're at in Nicole's chart. She's just such a busybody. But we go to the remediation of the chart via this lovely, absolutely lovely Mercury in Virgo, the sign of his exaltation in the fifth house of creativity. The escape for Nicole is being artistic. The minute that I saw Mercury in Virgo, the first thing that I thought of was pottery. The idea of working with hands, the not like with hands, but with her hands. The idea of Nicole specifically getting her hands into something earthy, something that can ground her, something that's mutable or moldable. Clay would be an excellent remediation for just from a grounding perspective because she's literally seated. Her feet are flat on the floor. She can ground. She can literally discharge any static via the mineralization of the material that she's working with. I think that would just be an excellent form of remediation from a pottery perspective. I think she'd also be really good at it, just because Leo and Taurus and Venus and Libra, like all of these things are just naturally very creative, very productive signs. And I think that engaging in an art form specifically would trigger this moon in Aquarius to be a little bit less apathetic and a little bit more in tune with the subtleties of the environment, especially if she plays some sort of music or listens to a helpful podcast while she's working. I think that the literal vibrations of the space as she works will start to shift and she won't feel as frazzled because she's actually tuning in the way that she should be as opposed to running around like a chicken with her head cut off. And we're not saying that you're incompetent, Nicole. In fact, having a Taurus ascendant and having Mars in Libra in the sixth makes you extraordinarily competent. But again, the combustion is the issue. Like your chart is overheating naturally, so we need to be a little bit more aware of this. And again, another combustion point. Like you have Jupiter and Sagittarius in the eighth house of business. Like you're constantly overextending yourself and striving and reaching for the ideal, and that can be really toxic over the long term with all these other placements. Like yes, we want the white picket fence. Like yes, we want to find the Holy Grail. Yes, we want all this achievement. But damn, girl, you gotta rest. You gotta rest. You gotta enjoy. Yeah? And I know that you're probably saying to yourself, Sam, I do enjoy, and I know that it can be a little bit stressful, but I do enjoy my work. I'm not saying that you don't. I'm saying that you have a tendency to be a little bit too aggressive, too pursuant, too inflamed, and we need to temper that. And I think a lot of your friends are trying to teach you that same lesson too. You have Saturn in Pisces retrograde in the 11th, which means that a lot of your friends are going to be rather stubborn, very spiritual, very grounding for you, very empathic. They're very watery and earthy by nature, which is an excellent complement to a lot of your fire and air placements in the chart. I think that if you could surround yourself with people who are a little bit more spiritual, a little bit more artistic, a little bit more yogic would be a good way to say it. And I'm not talking about the Karens who wear the Lululemon pants, who are just flaunting their spirituality because they bought a mala on Amazon and they think that they're enlightened. I'm talking about people who are actually Saturnian in their rigid, like, daily practice, but who also are Piscean in terms of their their embracing of the interconnected nature of reality, people who are able to slow down and embrace and encourage other people to slow down and embrace that steadiness and that ease that something like a more yogic practice would cultivate. Yes. So that's that. Thank you, Nicole, for donating your chart. I appreciate it. Da, 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 da. Thank you, everybody. So we've got one more chart before we wrap up. So we're going to talk about Gail. Gail is the 8th chart in our queue this morning, born at 12:30 a.m. in Bushy Heath. Let's take a peek. Gemini on the ascendant. Oh, Gemini on the ascendant with it's a family and home for the last couple charts. So we have Mercury in Virgo, the sign of his exaltation, in the 4th house of family and home, ruling the chart. This is an excellent placement for Mercury to be, and very, very strong. So the idea of home and family being very, very important to Gail, but also the family and home environment being extremely intellectual. Yeah, I'm a real fan of a lot of these placements. You also have the sun in Virgo in the 4th, which kind of makes you a hyper Virgo for sure. Just because you've got so much of this Gemini mutable energy, so much of this intellectual, detail-oriented energy in the chart, which I'm a huge fan of, as well as Saturn and Aquarius retrograde in the 9th of spirituality. I enjoy this. I'm enjoying these placements. But then we get into the moon in Libra, Mars and Libra combo in the 5th house of creativity, children, sexuality, parenting, all of that. Neptune and Scorpio in the 6th. Okay, so we're seeing the deeper aspects of the chart. Once we get over the fact that Gail has a lot of really nice, strong placements right off the bat, giving her security, giving her intellect, giving her mind a nice boost, and getting all of these Mercury Gemini aspects to the surface, we then get into the deeper side of the chart, which I think is actually helping people recover from family trauma. Because we've got this moon in Libra, which is just an excellent sign of remediation in the 5th house of children and parents. Plus we have Neptune in Scorpio, which is a rather toxic and addictive placement in the 6th house of work, but channeled appropriately can be excellent for therapists. And also this, the Mars from the 5th ruling that house of work. I think working with children and parents who have undergone abuse or toxicity, especially from a substance abuse perspective, I think you'd be excellent in child services. I think you'd be an excellent, I think you do very well in adoption. I think you do very well in social work. I think you do very well where you can be an advocate for children and parents who are in toxic situations. And you also understanding that it's not just children who need to be saved from parents, it's also parents who potentially need to be rescued from their children. A lot of people come into this life not intending to be parents, and unfortunately circumstances dictated otherwise, and you actually being able to provide remediation for both sides and understanding and helping other people recover from trauma from what we don't necessarily see on the surface from a sensationalized media standpoint. You would be excellent with that. Yes. Moon in Libra in the 5th, ruling this Cancer North Node in the 2nd. There's also this side of you that's very artistic. There's also this side of you that would do actually very, very well from a craft perspective. Like if you don't already have an Etsy store selling your products, I think you totally should. Not only are you very creative, but you have a good potential to make money from what you are creative in. The one thing that I do caution you on is that friends, Gail, are not always supportive. this Mars in Libra is ruling this Jupiter in Aries retrograde in the 11th. You know, you're attracted to people with very big personalities, people who are slightly more competitive, but people who are also very stubborn and set in their ways because of this retrograde. And I think that because it's naturally opposing this Mars in Libra in the 5th house, I think a lot of your social circles might take away from some of your personal endeavors. And although you enjoy spending time with friends, I think it's also really important. And also, you know, babysitting other friends' kids and, you know, helping other people have a good time as well. I think in your chart there's a little bit more of an idea of being taken advantage of from a friendship perspective, and I think that you just need to respect that, because there are a lot of things that you're very self-sufficient in, but it's not necessarily always in your best interest to rely on other people with this chart dynamic, because there's so much internal work that you're doing. Yeah, for sure. Let's see, what else do we want to talk about? Let's talk about this Saturn in Aquarius retrograde in the 9th. I think culture will come slowly over to you, especially when you turn as you turn 30 and as you turn 60 during your first and second Saturn returns. I think that the Saturn makes you slow to learn from a higher education standpoint, but what you learn completely. And although college might be something you return to later in life, and travel might be something that you do later in life, it is something that you kind of need to grow into, because again, you're so rooted in the home space. You've decided very clearly that you're going to focus on the people in your immediate community and serving them and working with the parent and child dynamics from that space. But I think that overall, like down the road, you will need to explore other cultures. You will need to enjoy the benefit of traveling abroad and learning about other people, places, and things. And you'll potentially do that with friends as well. Once you understand how to master that dynamic, and you understand that, yes, people can be a good time, but you don't always need a good time, do you, Gail? Because you're very self-satisfied as an individual. You know how to reach for your own methods of balancing, whereas some people don't necessarily understand that skill. You've kind of got it in spades. Excellent. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Let's take a peek. Yeah, so that was it. That was our 8 charts. I appreciate everybody jumping on the live stream. If you would like to be on the live stream, or if you have friends or family that would like this work, I'm running a little bit low on birth dates, places, and times. So tag them in the video, share the video, and have them private message me their birth date, place, and exact birth time. I'll add them to the queue. We'll pick this back up on Monday. We'll continue to do it Monday and Wednesday of next week. And check the live stream link below. I'll post once this live stream is up on YouTube. You can check previous live streams on YouTube if you just want to listen to me Astro-Babble at your face. Just search for ScorpioRisingAstrology.com on YouTube to find the channel. And if you'd like to book a private session, you can always go to my website, ScorpioRisingAstrology.com, send me an email for a session request, and we'll get you on the books. But for now, may the stars be ever in your favor.